The year is 2013, April specifically. The Croods is the top of the box office, and Macklemore's Thrift Shop is all over the radio, and meanwhile Google is releasing a piece of hardware that is destined to fail, at least in the short term. That product is the Google Glass, and in this case the Explorer program. People have been shelling out $1,500 US to actually test this out for Google and wear it around predominantly the San Francisco Bay Area to see what this technology could possibly do. It's a pair of glasses frames with no lenses, and on the side of it you've got a camera, you've got a small screen that you can see through the right eye, as well as a processor and everything you'd need to run this like a smartphone. Within 24 months, this technology will be functionally dead, the Google Glass version at least. The Explorer program will end. Some of the things that make this sync are the privacy implications, as well as some medical headaches that go on with these things, with many of the people wearing them around being labeled as glass holes. How new ideas and technologies spread and diffuse throughout a society or throughout an area is a fairly well-researched topic, and Rogers' innovation diffusion theory is one of the key theories that makes this happen. It posits that you've got a bunch of different kinds of people, including innovators, early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards, often in the tech world often referred to as Luddites, who actually make up the entirety of a base of where an idea might go. And it talks about the various kinds of things that people use to decide if they're going to adopt a new technology or idea. This often differs because the innovators have a very different view of that than the laggards do. There are 5 factors that influence adoption of an innovation, and we're going to look at the difference between how an innovator looks at those 5 and the early adopter looks at those 5 in the context of AR glasses. 3 of those 5 factors the innovators see as irrelevant. Those would be complexity, trialability, and observability. Complexity being simply how complex a technology is. Often the innovators will be the ones building that technology. They'll be the ones finding that technology, no matter how large the instruction manual is. Whereas an early adopter might need something that's a little more ready for market. Trialability is the ability for somebody to play with it. And again, the early adopter might need to see this at a store. They might need it demoed by a friend, which is a very powerful piece of diffusion, whereas the innovator will seek these things out. And lastly, observability. This is the ability for the object to actually have a measurable effect. The innovator really doesn't care. The innovator will do these things because it is cool, because it is neat, because it is interesting, whereas the early adopter will need to see some sort of advantage. Speaking of advantage, one of the other pieces is the relative advantage, and that's one of the factors that influence adoption. This is how each different group views where a product is in relation to what it's replacing. So in this case, it might be the smartphone. The innovator doesn't see that. The innovator would see something like an AR glasses as its own unique technology, and therefore this relative advantage is irrelevant. Whereas an early adopter would likely see it similar to a smartphone. It has a camera, it has a screen. Those are things that the early adopter wants to see as better than their smartphone before they're going to adopt this. The 5th factor, and left for last in this case because it is probably the piece that sunk this technology, at least initially, is compatibility. Compatibility talks about how consistent the innovation is with basically what your current view on a technology is, as well as what society views the technology is. And this leads us to one of our major problems with AR glasses, and one that has consistently been used to slow this technology down, and that is some privacy concerns. What happens in a society when everybody is wearing a camera on their face? In the last 15 years, society's come a long way in viewing privacy concerns. Everybody has a camera in their pocket now. And this is why this technology could be on the precipice of doing something interesting, because it is being applied in certain areas. It is being applied for competitive cyclists who want to get data about their current ride, who don't want to have their hands caught up in something else. It's good for factory workers who want to be getting tutorials about how to repair something, for example, while they're working, or business people who want to use many virtual screens for something like a Microsoft HoloLens. These are all applications that are very controlled environments that are working, that actually jump that piece of privacy and are making this technology applied. 10 years ago as a phys ed teacher, I was using a piece of this technology, a similar wearable, similar or potential Internet of Things project, which was the Garmin smartwatches for running, where students would take their own watch. They'd get their own heart rate, they could test how far they'd run, and they'd use that feedback to actually do something better with what they were doing in phys ed. And this is where I potentially see this technology going in education. One of my colleagues said it very well, saying that educational theory hasn't really gone very far in the last 50 years, in the sense that we don't have a really good way of getting specific feedback about how a student is reacting to things on a moment-to-moment basis. And this is technology where this could absolutely change. A lot of these AR smart glasses double as information gathering devices. They're actually gathering data from the person who is using them in order to react effectively to them. And that is one of the most exciting pieces. Not just the fact that they have a screen on their face, not just the fact that they have a camera on these, but the fact that the actual glasses themselves could be used to gather things like, what is the student focusing on right now? What is their mental state right now? Are they getting agitated? Do they need a walk? Do they need a break? This kind of moment-to-moment feedback might be something in education that would absolutely be essential. But first we need to get through society's privacy concerns. We need to normalize the gathering of certain kinds of data before this technology can really take off. An important piece of Rogers' diffusion of innovation theory is the idea of the taking off point. This is where the innovators or the early adopters start to manage their social networks to really get a technology to go mainstream, to get it into the hands of everybody. I can't wait to see if society gets over these foibles around privacy and actually this technology takes off the way smartphones did 15 years ago. And maybe at that point, we'll be able to wear this technology on our face and won't be referred to as glassholes anymore.